Thanks, Rick. The reading today is from Genesis 1, the entire chapter. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. And God said, "Let there be an expanse between the waters to separate water from water." So God made the expanse and separated the water under the expanse from the water above it. And it was so. God called the expanse sky. And there was evening, and there was morning, the second day. And God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place. Let the dry ground appear." And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants, and trees on the land that bear fruit with the seed in it, according to their various kinds." And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the third day. And God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark seasons and days and years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the sky to give light on the earth." And it was so. God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. God set them in the expanse of the sky to give light on the earth, to govern the day and the night, and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fourth day. And God said, "Let the water teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the sky." So God created the great creatures of the sea, and every living and moving thing with which the water teems, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and increase in number, and fill the water in the seas, and let the birds increase on the earth." And there was evening, and there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, "Let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, livestock, creatures that move along the ground, and wild animals, each according to its kind." And it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that moved along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, and over every living creature that moves on the ground." Then God said, "I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. And to all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds of the air, and all the creatures that move on the ground, everything that has breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food." And it was so. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day.
Thank you, Neil. A good opening is important. Whether it's a book or a movie or a talk, you want to grab people's attention, get them interested in what's going on. In fact, some openings do that so well that they take on a life of their own. If you don't believe me, do a quick search online for famous opening lines and see how many you recognize. See how many you recognize when you haven't read the book or seen the movie or whatever it might be. Let's try a few. Call out when you know what the work is, what text this has come from. It is a truth universally acknowledged. Didn't even have to finish the sentence. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice. Let's try something a bit more obscure. Call me Ishmael. Moby Dick. Almost no one reads that these days, but it's still one of the most famous opening lines in history. Humour. Humour is sometimes important. Let's try this one. There was a boy called Eustace Clarence Scrubb, and he almost deserved it. Voyage of the Dawn Treader. It's one of the Narnia books, C.S. Lewis. How about this one? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis, or the Bible, depending on whether you're taking the Bible as one book or 66. Just that one line is enough for instant recognition by billions of people around the world. And let's be honest, most of those, in all likelihood, have not read the Bible. Like all good opening lines, it grabs the attention, but it also introduces the main character, God, and it gives the whole book its sense of scale. This book is cosmic in scope. It makes claims about everything. So, as you may have gathered, we're starting a new series on the book of Genesis, and we're beginning in the beginning with Genesis chapter 1. And I don't know exactly how far we'll get before Easter, but my intent overall is that we actually work our way through all of the first 11 chapters of Genesis and over just into the first few verses of Genesis chapter 12, that promise from God to Abram of blessing for all peoples. And I do this with a little bit of trepidation, particularly today. The first chapter of Genesis, God's account of creation, is quite understandably the subject of some very strong opinions. And whatever I say, somebody is likely to disagree. I've mentioned to a few people already, if I ever preach a sermon that is going to cause people to walk out on me, this one's likely to be it. I hope you won't, though. I hope you won't, and not just because I think there's room for common ground, regardless of which view you take, but also because Genesis 1 and the chapters that follow are that important. Whether you agree with me or not, there are some matters here that you absolutely have to be clear on if you want to have any hope of understanding God and any hope of understanding why the good news of Jesus is good news. Let me put it this way. You could go directly from Genesis chapter 12, verse 3 to Matthew chapter 1. Just skip the other 38 books of the Old Testament, and most of Genesis for that matter. I wouldn't recommend it. I think losing the richness of the Hebrew Bible and the Old Testament would be a huge tragedy, but you could. You could go straight from the promise to Abram to its fulfillment in Jesus. If, on the other hand, you were to cut those first 11 chapters of Genesis, and Genesis 1, 2, and 3 in particular, the whole thing makes no sense whatsoever. So for all that it may be controversial, this is actually a series that I've been looking forward to for a while. Now, since we are starting with Genesis 1, we may as well get the big one out of the way early. One of the key questions for a lot of people when they come to this text is the question of timing. Did God create the world, and more than the world, everything, in 6 24-hour days, or did he not? Did God create the world in 6 24-hour days or not? And I know there will be people waiting to hear my position on this one. And if that's you, I fear you're going to be disappointed. Because my short answer is, I don't know. I don't know. And I'm not being glib. It's not an answer I give lightly. I say I don't know as someone who has an honours degree in science, specialising in animal genetics, and nearly 4 years of theological education, including a unit dedicated to Genesis. So it is something that I've thought about quite a lot. So how did I reach that conclusion? Firstly, Genesis chapter 1 does talk about God creating the heavens and the earth in 6 days and resting on the seventh, which is significant in its own right. And there's no question in my mind, none whatsoever, that God could create everything in 6 24-hour days. God is God. All things are possible with him. He could. So that view of creation in 6 24-hour days and the younger view of the earth that goes with it are entirely within God's power to achieve. If that's what God did, then I say, praise God. Praise God. Your ways are higher than my ways. Your thoughts are higher than my thoughts. Your power and majesty, who can understand them? I would have no problem with that. But personally, I doubt it. I don't think 6 24-hour days is the most likely explanation. And I know that will upset some people. And I'm sorry about it, but there it is. So let me make clear, I mean no disrespect. I do think it's significant that Genesis 1 uses the formula and there was evening and there was morning, the first day and so on, because that actually fits really closely with the Hebrew and Jewish understanding of when the day began, a 24-hour day. Mostly for me, it comes back to a question of genre. Most of Genesis is written as history. It's prose narrative. But Genesis 1 is not. It's not classic Hebrew poetry either, because it doesn't have those matching couplets that you see in Proverbs and Psalms, but it is poetic. And that's important because there are other figurative ways of understanding that word days without doing injury to the voice and authority of Scripture. I believe it's possible. You may disagree, but I believe it's possible. If you're interested in looking this up, you might want to go see the works of John Lennox. There's a book called 7 Days That Divide the World, or do a search for some of his videos online. There's lots of them. But basically, there are 2 other alternatives. The first option, and I'm not so keen on this one, is that rather than referring to a 24-hour period, days is just a way of describing a logical framework for creation. And there is a logical framework. We will come back to that. But I don't think that gives enough weight to the sense of time that comes with that word days. So again, as I said, not my favourite. The last interpretation is that day doesn't refer to a 24-hour day, but it does refer to a period of time. It refers to an age, a long but finite period of time. And if that seems a bit far-fetched to you, it's actually consistent with the use of that word day or days at other places in the Bible. So it is scriptural. And I would have to say that this one is probably my preferred explanation, because I believe it respects the language of the Bible, and that is essential for me. That is absolutely essential for me. You may disagree with me on this, but please don't think that I don't hold the Bible in the highest esteem or respect that it has to have authority in our lives. But it also allows more room for some of the things that science tells us about our world. And look, that is important to me. Full disclosure, my dad is a geophysicist who measures geological age in millions of years. And he's told me already that he's going to be watching this video afterwards. So now we come into even more controversial territory. One of the things that long day interpretation opens space for is evolution, or theological evolution at least. The idea that part of God's creative activity was to set things up in a way that living creatures would evolve. Now, as I said, I've studied zoology at university. I've studied evolution. And I think it is an elegant theory. Elegant theory, just a theory. If, and it is a big if, theological evolution is a thing, then I say in exactly the same way, praise God. Your ways are higher than my ways, and your thoughts are higher than my thoughts. Your power and majesty, who can understand them? But let's be clear, evolution is just a theory. You can produce evidence consistent with it, and plenty of people have done that. But I don't think it's something you can ultimately prove. And more, you need to recognize that evolution has been taken way, way out of context by a number of people who are looking for an alternative to God. So Richard Dawkins is one of those, although he's kind of dropped off the radar a little bit. And for all that it's a neat theory, evolution has some serious gaps. From a Christian's perspective, perhaps the most serious is that it completely fails to account for how humanity, man and woman, is made in the image of God. So there are pitfalls all over the place. And in the end, my answer is, I don't know. What's the point then? What's the point? Why even tackle this passage? Well, because of that first line. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. There are certain statements of fundamental truth in Genesis 1 that are not optional, and that's one of them. We may disagree about the length of days, and I, for one, will be okay with that. But if you tell me anything or anyone other than God was at work in creation, I will tell you no. That is one of those line in the sand things. And to help us understand what's happening, I want to come back to that question of genre. Because in my view, Genesis 1 isn't a history in its classic form, and it's certainly not a recipe book, a step-by-step guide on how to create everything. It's an origin story. Have you guys come across those? Kind of ironically, the main place we see origin stories these days is in comic books and comic book movies. Superman, last child of doomed Krypton. Peter Parker, bitten by a radioactive spider, becomes the amazing Spider-Man. Now, obviously, Genesis chapter 1 isn't an origin story like that, but it is an origin story. It's a narrative that grounds everything that comes afterwards. And it's written in opposition to other origin stories. That bit's important because Genesis 1 has a historical context. When Moses wrote Genesis, there were lots of competing origin stories. Every other culture had one, even down to individual cities and tribes. The Egyptians had loads of them. Babylon, well, they had some too, but they tended to focus on one story. It's called the Enuma Elish, the 7 tablets of creation. You can go and look it up if you want. There's lots written on it. I wouldn't actually recommend it though, because it's really not that edifying. So, lots of stories going around. None of them are correct. Then God inspires the writing of Genesis. And the contrast between Genesis and these other origin stories are hugely important. And I put some of the most significant up on this slide. Yep, that's the one. So in all of the other origin stories of the time, there were lots and lots of gods. Polytheism was standard practice. And in stark contrast, Genesis 1 says, no, there is one God. Now, we know as a question of theology that all the persons of the Trinity were there. We read the passage from John chapter 1, which talks about the Word who was with God in the beginning. And in Genesis 1, verse 2, the Spirit is hovering over the waters. So the Trinity is there, but one God. In all of the other origin stories, there are aspects of what we understand as creation, sun, moon, other physical objects, that are venerated, that are revered as gods. In Genesis chapter 1, we see very clearly the sun and moon, along with everything else, are created. They are not divine. In all of the other origin stories, creation is hard. It's difficult, it's challenging, it comes about through conflict and struggle and sometimes outright war. In Genesis 1, you'd have to say it seems easy, or at least simple. God speaks and it is so. And God's word is hugely important in Genesis 1. In pretty much all of the other origin stories, humanity comes in with a very low status, almost as an afterthought sometimes. So just to give you a quick example, the Babylonian story. In that story, the main creator God creates humans to do the work for the other gods. We are created as slaves. That's it. In contrast, in Genesis chapter 1, humanity is given a special place, a high status, dignity, worth. And finally, in pretty much, well, most at least of the other origin stories, creation is actually almost an accident. It's not the main thrust. The conflict is the main idea. Creation just happens out of that. So again, in the Babylonian story, it's the corpse of the defeated god that is used to make the earth. In Genesis chapter 1, creation is deliberate. Creation is purposeful. And I've left that one till last because it speaks not just to those ancient origin stories, but also to the purely secular view of creation. That the Big Bang and everything that followed was just an accident of physics and chemistry. And to that, Genesis 1 simply says no. It may not tell us why God created, but everything in it speaks to the deliberate choice of God. God said, "Let there be light," and it was so. Let's dig into that a little further, because this goes back to what I was saying about a logical framework. In some ways, this isn't actually the main point that I want to get to, but this really helped me understand Genesis 1, so I think it's worth the time. The key is back in verse 2, where it says, "Now the earth was formless and empty." And that, in a sense, is our problem statement. The earth was formless and empty. You might have a different translation of those words, but the meaning will be about the same. And what God is doing in creation is fixing those problems. The earth was formless, he gives it shape. The earth was empty, he fills it. In that order. First the celestial, then the waters and skies, then the land. God forms them, then he fills them. So, day one, God creates light and darkness. He takes the ultimate formlessness and gives it order. And by the way, do you notice in the process he creates time? No small thing there. Day two, God separates the water under the vault from the water above it. He creates the sea and the sky. Day three, God gathers the water under the vault, causing dry land to appear. He also creates plants, which is probably the most awkward thing to fit in this scheme, but plants, very quickly, plants aren't regarded as living things in the same way in Hebrew culture because they don't have blood. The life is in the blood and plants don't have blood. So they're part of the form of the land rather than filling it. Day four, God goes from that general light, he's given it form, now he fills it with the greater light, the sun, the lesser light, the moon, and the stars. Day five, again, you can just carry on through this. He fills the sea and the skies, every living thing with which the water teems, and every winged bird. Day six, God fills the land. God creates all the land animals, and last of all, us. The earth is formless and empty, so God forms it and fills it. There is a logical order, and knowing that helps us understand why God speaks and acts the way he does. Coming back to our first table of comparisons, though, if we go to the next slide. The main point I want to get across is that high place that Genesis gives to God. And from that, the high place that Genesis gives to humans, to people. And this really is it. The whole purpose of Genesis chapter 1 is to show beyond question that God is awesome. There is no other God. No challenger or competitor to his power. There is no accident or mistake. Nothing God did not intend. It's not even hard. God speaks and it is so. And the result? There is no compromise. At the end of Genesis chapter 1, creation is as God willed it to be, and it is good. Which brings us to verses 26 and 27. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God created mankind, humanity, in his image. That is, without doubt, one of the most significant theological statements in the Bible. And people have thought about that image in lots of ways. Over the centuries, lots of people have studied that passage. Some have said it's in some attribute that we have. So Thomas Aquinas said that it was in our intellect and reason. Others have said that it's in our capacity to have relationships. But the third main approach is the one I want to raise with you, which is that our image, the image that we bear of God, is functional. We're like God in what we are supposed to do. Remember, God says in the very next verse, verse 28, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground." Humanity is created last, to be like God and in his image, and given delegated authority over much of God's creation. We are supposed to represent God to the rest of creation. We are God's representatives. And in the Bible, that is both a royal function and a priestly function. It is hugely important. And that's not dependent on any capacity or attribute. That's for all of us, for everyone. Every human being is created in the image and likeness of God. Every single one. And the shaping influence of that truth over human society is undeniable. It is the starting point for just about every statement of equality and human rights. Now we have to think about the flip side. It means that anything any of us does that makes a person seem less than human on the grounds of race or gender or sexuality or nationality, any dehumanizing behavior at all is seriously, seriously bad. If you've done the Safe Church training with Baptist Churches WA, you might see a very similar expression used for abuse. Dehumanizing behavior is abusive behavior. But it's even worse than that. Because it's not just abuse of the person, it's a sin against God who created that person in his image. Saying or even implying that someone is less than human is never, never a little thing. It is a fundamental violation. It is not a coincidence that in his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus he equates really contempt for another person with murder. So, to recap, the question of timing, as much as it takes people's attention, is not the main point. And I sincerely hope I haven't offended anyone. I probably have, but I hope I haven't. I'm only human. I don't want to lose friends over this. But my own respect for the authority of Scripture leads me to say, if the most important thing for you in Genesis chapter 1 is to insist on creation in 6 24-hour days, or on theological evolution, or on any of that stuff, you've picked the wrong hill on which to make a stand. The most important point in Genesis chapter 1 is that in the beginning there is only God, and God alone is responsible for all of creation. Genesis chapter 1 was never intended to move us to argue. It was intended to move us to awe. And because God alone is God, unchallenged, incomparable, awesome in power, the original creation is not accidental, haphazard, or flawed. It is deliberate, purposeful, and good. In this good creation, God creates humanity in his likeness and image to represent him, to rule for him as stewards and regents in creation, a place of special dignity. And because of that high place, that special dignity, we sully that at our peril because it is abuse and a sin against our Creator. Now, hopefully that's given you a few things to think about the next time that you come to this chapter. But I don't want to finish without leaving you with some practical things to do. So here's two. The first is relatively straightforward. The fall and sin have disrupted our relationship with all of the rest of creation, but nature has not lost its ability to move us to the awe of our Creator. And it may be tougher because we still can't travel as freely as we might otherwise do, but sometime in the next couple of weeks, I want each of you to seek out a place that is particularly beautiful or meaningful to you. It might be the beach, it might be the bush, you might need to go further afield to places of red dirt and endless blue skies. You might need to get creative. You might need to rely on photos and video for places that we can't get to. But find some place that speaks not only to your eyes but to your spirit. And then take the time to look beyond that place to its Creator. to see beyond the beauty of the scene to the beauty and majesty of our Creator God. Reflect on the words of Genesis 1 and ask the Holy Spirit to refresh in you that sense of awe and reverence. We know nature, creation, it's not divine, but it can help us connect with our Creator, and that still has great value. The second thing I want to put to you is more difficult because I can't tell how you think about and talk about the people around you. But again, as a practical thing, be mindful. Be vigilant about the way you think about and speak about other people this week. Is there anyone who you are tempted to think about as less valuable or less important or somehow less complete? It's hazardous to name examples because even just saying this is a reminder that people are seen differently. But maybe there's an unacknowledged bias in you against people of another ethnicity, skin color or religion, whatever it might be. Maybe it's an annoying co-worker who just seems to be constantly wrong. Maybe it's a person in a wheelchair or a person with dementia. Maybe it's the homeless person sitting on the street corner or walking back and forth at the lights. Guard yourselves. Guard yourselves against sin. And if you find yourself standing in contempt of another person, remind yourself, this person is made in the image of God. This person is made in the image of God. Hold that thought and see how it affects the way you treat others. Fear God and respect His creation. Normally we would finish with a song, and I'm aware that we've run a little bit over time, but I wanted to try something different, and this is kind of a spur-of-the-moment thing, so I haven't got slides up or anything. But I thought we would finish today by reading together Psalm 8, which is another psalm that speaks to the majesty of God and the place of humanity in creation. So if you've got a Bible with you, I'm reading from the NIV, but don't worry if we are out of sequence because we have a few different words, that doesn't matter. If you've got a Bible or you've got an app on your phone, open it up. Psalm chapter 8, it's relatively short. And my hope is that this would be a prayer for us today. You can read silently or out loud as you like. You ready? Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory in the heavens. Through the praise of children and infants, you have established a stronghold against your enemies, to silence the foe and the avenger. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is mankind that you are mindful of them? Human beings that you care for them. You have made them a little lower than the angels and crowned them with glory and honor. You have made them rulers over the works of your hands. You put everything under their feet, all flocks and herds and the animals of the wild, the birds in the sky and the fish in the sea, all that swim the paths of the seas. Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. Amen. That concludes